What is up, my friends? We are live on the YouTubes tonight talking about the day two XFL draft coverage. If you've been living under a rock the last day or so, you don't realize that the XFL draft happened. Today was day two. All the teams had a chance to draft players over the last 2 days. Today's part of the draft consisted of a couple things. Get to my slide here. So the first 2 days were focused on different aspects or different phases. Where is it? Here it is. Different parts of the draft. So day one, yesterday, was the skills position, which was the quarterback, wide receiver, running back, and tight end. Offensive line was the second part of that phase draft, and then the defensive front seven were part of that draft. Today, same time, same bat channel, at 10 a.m., we kicked it off with the defensive backfield, and then we had an open draft, which was all the remaining players. So you had 10 rounds skill players, 10 rounds offensive line, 10 rounds defensive front seven, then 10 defensive backfield, and then 30 rounds of the open draft, which was all players, including kicker, punter, long snapper, etc. You could take a look. This is the draft order that things took place. They do it in a snake order. You start at the top, come back up, just like you do in fantasy football. Today, Dallas had the first pick of the DB phase with New York, Houston, DC, LA, Seattle, St. Louis, Tampa. And then the open phase, St. Louis had the first pick, New York, Seattle, LA, Tampa, Houston, DC, and Dallas. So that's what happened today. The interesting part is that the first phase of the draft, or I should say phase four of the draft, the defensive backfield, that was online. But the last open draft was not online, and actually it wasn't completed up until a couple hours ago. So today what we're going to do is, if you can look at our other video where we go through day one. Today we're going to focus on day two. Remember, day one also included all of the tier one quarterbacks. That's all been announced. What was interesting is what was going to happen in the open draft, of whether more quarterbacks were taken. Cardell Jones with the Defenders, Landry Jones, Dallas Renegades, Brandon Silvers, Seattle Dragons, Philip Walker, Houston Roughnecks, Mac McGloin, New York Guardians, Luis Perez, LA Wildcats, Jordan Tomano, St. Louis Battlehawks, and Tampa Bay Aaron Murray. Now today, what we hit was the defensive backfield and some interesting names on the list. One name that people have been, Will Hill, had experience in the NFL, was a name that jumped out at me. But the main name that people were really interested in, let's see if we can find him. Going down is your first a person with college eligibility left that joined the XFL. So he had his senior year left, is Kenny Robinson, the 39th pick in the XFL Phase 4 draft, going to the St. Louis Battlehawks. He was out of West Virginia, so that was the 5th round. He left West Virginia after his true sophomore season to enter the XFL. So he's got a couple of years left. He earned a first-team All Big 12 honor in 2018 while compiling 123 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 7 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, a fumble recovery. A lot of people were thinking that he would be a potential first-round pick or high-round draft choice, but he couldn't finish college due to grades, that kind of thing. So he is one other guy that was interesting on this list. Some other names out there. Raheem Moore played with the Denver Broncos. He was involved with that famous touchdown pass from Joe Flacco in the playoffs, and that was the year that the Ravens won the Super Bowl. I remember watching that game. I was like, oh my gosh. So a lot of guys in here with past NFL experience, some young guys. Most of these guys on this list that you see, and this is all searchable on XFL News Hub, is a lot of guys, just kind of bounced around the NFL a little bit and was practice squad players and now is getting a full shot to play in the XFL. So that was the DBs. That took about 2 hours ish. By the time they had this done, they took a break for about an hour. And then it was on to the final phase, the fifth phase, which was basically free for all, any kind of player that you want to pick. And in that, as you can see, there's a lot of players. We'll start with the Dallas Renegades. Now, Dallas had the first pick, I believe. I think we just said that. The first pick in the 5th round of the draft. Some notable names that Dallas picked up. Let me pull it up. Was Trey Watson, played for University of Maryland here in Maryland. A good career. Had a strong, played for the Miami Dolphins for a little bit. Another guy was Ryan Broyles, Oklahoma Sooner. Now this one was an interesting one because the Oklahoma Sooner, they had a couple Sooners reunions with Bob Stoops. Broyles was a premier catcher for Stoops' Sooners for his final 3 seasons in Norman, total of 39 touchdowns and just short of 4,000 receiving yards. He became a second-round pick in the 2012 NFL Draft, but he's basically been retirement for a little while, played a couple seasons, and then has been on the bench. Just hasn't played, and then basically he's come out of retirement to play in the XFL. So it'll be interesting to see with him and Landry Jones. Again, getting these guys, and we talked about this if you listen to the podcast, we talk about how getting guys that we are familiar with, the coaches are familiar with, in order to help their, it's the first season. So you need to be able to find some guys that you're familiar with. So there are some of those players. The next team we'll take a look at is your New York Guardians. Now the Guardians, a couple guys to look into is Quantree Henderson, played for Pitt. He was one of the country's best return specialists in all of football from 2015 to 2017 with the Panthers. He averaged 26.6 yards per return over 73 returns for his career. 7 return touchdowns. Quantree Henderson. That was in his college career. Matthew Colburn, Wake Forest product. Also selected by the Guardians as another player. I mean, some other guys in here. I mean, it's still just a lot of guys that have kind of bounced around. But those were kind of the big names out of this list, so you could take a look at theirs. Next, we're going to hit Tampa, your Tampa Bay Vipers. A couple guys on here is Ralph Webb, played for the Vanderbilt Commodores. 4,000 yards rushing over his career. 16 games of at least 100 yards. I think Trestman will like that. He ranks number 6 all-time among SEC running backs in career rushing yardage. And he could be a prime, interesting, make an impact in Mark Trestman's offense. Defensive line, Bobby Richardson, played for the Hoosiers. He was a starter for the New Orleans Saints in 2015 and produced 40 tackles, 4 tackles for loss and an interception. He started 27 games while appearing and 45 across his career for the Hoosiers and was a team captain his senior year while earning team awards for outstanding lineman. He is from Tampa Bay, so that's a local product there. Vinny Testaverde Jr. is on that list. Was one of the quarterbacks taken in that 5th round. Of course, we all know who his dad is. If you don't know, longtime NFL player. Other guys on this list, those are probably the names that stick out. You got your punter and your kicker. It'll be interesting if they bring in more kickers later. And then they're going to do a supplemental draft later on. How's that going to work? Because you already have your 71, but I guess some of these guys might fall off and decide that they don't want to do it. And so it'll be interesting to see over the course of the next month how these rosters shake out from the time that everybody was drafted to the time we actually even start to practice. Next team we're going to take a look at is the St. Louis Battlehawks. That's right, your St. Louis Battlehawks. On this list, guys that kind of jump out. Elliott Fry, Elliott Fry was the first player taken in the Phase 5 draft. So they went kicker first, which I thought that was interesting. Other guys, wide receiver Brandon Riley, played for Nebraska. Total of 70 receptions, 1,275 yards and 6 touchdowns. He was a good slot receiver. Spent the 2017, 2019 on 4 different NFL teams. And again, we've talked about this before. You're going to find this a lot with a lot of these players as that bounced around to a couple practice squads, and then that was it. Defensive end Marcus Jones, Angelo State Rams. Jones had a historic Division II player. There's Division II players and there's Division III players, which is great for those leagues because if you're a Division III player and you're like, whatever, like I'm done after this, you have a shot. Division II player, you have a shot, maybe not in the NFL, but with the XFL. That kind of changes the dynamic. If you're a college student thinking that you're all done, you actually might have a shot in the XFL to maybe play for a couple of years, which would be very cool. Jones had a historic year at D2, racking up consecutive Lone Star Conference Defensive Player of the Year honors, claiming the Gene Upshaw Award, which honors the best D2 lineman, and was a finalist for the Harlan Hill Trophy, which is given to the most valuable player in Division II. I'm so glad they let these Division II guys get a shot at it. Because if it happens where these Division II guys start to make a name for themselves in the XFL, that's going to translate into the NFL. Jones led all NCAA players with 34 tackles for a loss in 2018, which is 12.5 more than any other player in all of Division II. He also had a pretty good career there, and so he played for the Angelo State Rams. On to the next team, your Seattle Dragons. Take a look at their players. Pulling them up. Seattle. Guys on their list, B.J. Daniels, quarterback, and Joe Callahan, getting 2 guys that were considered to be potential Tier 1 quarterbacks on the list. That was kind of a surprise, considering not a lot of these teams picked other quarterbacks. Other guys on the list, I thought B.J. Daniels was going to be a potential Tier 1 guy myself. Going through the list, a couple other names, linebacker Dante Booker, Ohio State Buckeye. And wide receiver Corey Robertson, Southern Mississippi Eagles. Robinson was a breakout player in 2017 for the Golden Eagles, logging 76 receptions, 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, and route to be named first-team All-Conference USA receiver. Robinson decided to leave his final season of eligibility behind and declare for the NFL Draft in 2018 before getting a tryout with the Minnesota Vikings. Clearly, that didn't work out, but again, a guy that had some college eligibility but left school, tried his shot at the NFL, didn't make it, and now has a chance to make a name for himself in the XFL. We're going to get this a lot. Next, your hometown, your America's team, of course, as we refer to them here on the XFL News Hub. Your DC Defenders. Some names that stuck out for me, which of course is Matt Elam. As a Ravens fan, I remember Matt Elam was basically the guy who replaced Ed Reed, was kind of like the young guy coming in for Ed Reed and played okay and then just kind of disappeared. I remember us being like, wait, what happened to Matt Elam? Where did he go? So, yeah, he was a 2-year starter for the Ravens, played it for the Gators. Big time player for the Gators. I think Matt Elam was I don't know what round pick he was, but he was a high draft. Oh, he's a former first round draft pick for the Ravens. That's what I thought. So one of those guys in the XFL that is a former first round pick. Again, playing for the Gators, had a good college career. I'm excited to see him have a resurgence here with your DC Defenders. Another one, Stanford Cardinal, linebacker AJ Tarpley. Good college career. Had some pass breakups, played for a couple NFL teams. He had one season with the Buffalo Bills and appeared in 15 games while starting 2. So I had his shot at starting. Was his captain his senior year at Stanford. Again, excited about Matt Elam. Oh, there was another guy on this list that I wanted to talk about. Was there? No, those were those guys. So pretty interesting list here. LA stands for excellence, as Winston Moss likes to say. They had a good draft. A couple names that really stuck out to everybody on this list as you're taking a look at it is look at defensive tackle Sean Oakman, a guy who is a beast when he played for the Baylor Bears back in the day. Had some personal issues on the side, and kind of his career didn't go anywhere. And now, hopefully, he's got his issues behind him. If you look at a picture of this guy, he looks like a monster. And now he's getting a shot at the XFL. So really excited to see Sean Oakman on there. Another quarterback is Terrian Christian, a South Dakota State Jackrabbit. He had an impressive career with the Jackrabbits at the FCS level. He went undrafted in the 2019 NFL Draft, but made a strong impression with the Cowboys after being cut at the start of the league's regular season. Athletically, he's a mobile guy. Had a little shot with the Cowboys, and now he's getting a shot here. And another one, XFL. If you've been following the XFL and been following anything, you know the story of Jeremiah Spicer. He's kind of like became our guy. He is definitely a fan favorite in the XFL. And Jeremiah Spicer, there's a great video from the XFL when they let Jeremiah Spicer know that he was selected and he'll be part of the Los Angeles Wildcats. It's a great video. Go out and see. So, I mean, with the LA Wildcats, you got Winston Moss, you got some of the DBs that they took, and they've got Sean Oakman, you've got Jeremiah Spicer, you've got, Elijah Hood and some other players, Luis Perez, Norm Chow. LA Wildcats is going to be a team to watch coming up in the kickoff 2020, kickoff in the XFL. And finally, last but not least, we go all the way down to June Jones's team in Houston. Your Houston Roughnecks rounding out the final piece of their draft on their day 2. One of the picks that they took early that was a guy that was talked about was Coney Elay. Played in 65 NFL games, starting 19 for the Panthers, Jets, Raiders, racked up 96 tackles, 15 sacks, 6 forced fumbles. He was first team all SEC selection his final year at Missouri, played for the Missouri Tigers. Guy with a lot of NFL experience, should work well with Ted Cottrell's offensive line. Another guy, linebacker Carl Bradford, Arizona State Sun Devils, defensive playmaker, 2-time all Pac-12 selection, including first team honors in 2014. another guy that putting out there that could be pretty good. There, Joe Horn Jr., who actually was with the Baltimore Ravens, I believe, as a practice. He was on the team for a little bit. So he got picked there too, as some other names out there. But names that we did not see on this list, or on any list for that matter. And are you guys surprised or not? We got guys like no Trent Richardson, no Jonathan Manziel, no Manziel, no Trent Richardson. And I really thought, I was like, if Manziel wasn't a tier 1, then he was out. Trent Richardson, I'm like, well, he's kind of old, but I mean, you would think you would throw a late round pick flyer on Trent Richardson. But like, they really went young with these guys. And there was a lot of guys on Twitter that were surefire that we thought that would get picked and didn't. So it's really interesting how these guys kind of came up with these picks. We'll have a full recap on XFL News Hub when it comes to all of our draft picks. We were just waiting for the final list to come out from the XFL so we can have our tracker here where you can just type in CB and then you get all the cornerbacks, or you type in any team with the name state in it. You got, NC State, Florida State, so you can kind of look up. We're looking to try to do a big list in the next day or so that's got every single player, but we were waiting for this first list to come out. And then we got everything on XFL News Hub. We got guys writing up about notable players from each of the phases of the draft, and we're done. The draft is over. We had the biggest day in the history of XFL News Hub yesterday when it came to this draft. I mean, just a monster day. So much fun covering the thing. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast. If you want to listen to our podcast, we're on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Oh, I have Spotify on there twice. This probably should be Apple Podcast. I should probably fix that. And you can listen to our podcast on here. Make sure you subscribe and listen. Oh, look at these ladies. Hello. That's just an ad, my friends. That's just an ad. Settle down. So you can subscribe to our podcast. You get the subscribe to this channel as well, because we got a lot of good information out there. Let's hit the chat rooms real quick. Shane asked, which roster do we think is the best? Shane asking, which one is the best? Man, just from the quick looking at each one of these rosters across the board, and we didn't even talk about Ryan Broyles. Did we talk about him yet? Another name player. I don't know which one is the best, because I think DC has got a good one. I'm a little biased. I like Matt Elam, and I like some of the earlier picks that they did. The one that intrigued, I don't know what the best is, and let us know what you think in the comments. But I think LA has the most interesting of the. I mean, Sean Oakman is going to be real interesting, and Jeremiah Spicer alone will make for an interesting team. LA. I'm really interested to see that one. Someone, Hunter asked, was Terrell Owens in the draft? No. Now, let me tell you quickly the Terrell Owens story, because we were the ones that broke it. So the XFL, let me pull up that Terrell Owens story. We're going to talk about this Terrell Owens story. I was going to save it for the podcast, but we got a couple minutes left. We'll look for players. Now, what happened is every day on the XFL's website, when they were doing these player pool kind of things, they would have this list, this PDF list that you could click on and download. And so I did that. So they had those for every day on the website. And basically the URL was something that you could just type in. It was like a bunch of gibberish, day_4, day_3.pdf, whatever. So I went on there waiting for this thing to come out. Oh, let me put up on the on here our Terrell Owens story that we posted, which got play on Pro Football Talk and some others were kind of poo-pooing us. But I got this list off of an XFL. It wasn't the XFL site, but it was the site that stored their these drafts. And so I just happened to pull it out, and I actually just typed it in thinking that it came early. So I was like, oh, cool. Like, well, I just have the scoop. I can post this out before everybody else. But this is the list. And I was kind of looking through it. And I was like, okay, Clay Harbor, that's the guy that was on Bachelor. Okay. And I'm like kind of going through the list. I'm like, oh, I don't reckon. I was waiting for see like a Johnny Manziel or something like that. Coney Early, who got drafted. And I'm kind of going through this list. And then I'm going down. I think, was it on this side? Where was it? Oh, and I'm going down, and then all of a sudden I see Terrell Owens, wide receiver, Tennessee Chattanooga. And I'm like, wait a second. I went back to my reporter guys, and I was like, wait. I even looked. I was like, maybe there's another Terrell Owens. Like, I didn't make this up. You could see all the names. All these names are legit. Well, actually, they have Clay Harbor twice. Just noticed that. So maybe this was a rough draft that accidentally got put up there and it shouldn't have. I don't know what the deal is, but I found it and it had Terrell Owens. So we went with it thinking that maybe this was a big story because this isn't official. It's not like somebody just gave it to me and, was like, I'm going to trick you. I'm not that stupid. And I know how this stuff works. And so we put it out there and it was there for a while and then it got picked up by everything. And then, of course, the XFL came and reached out to us, and they said we got official word that Terrell Owens is not part of their Group 5 draft pool, and then that was it. But we kept it up because this was a legit thing, and at one point, Terrell Owens was part of this somewhere. Maybe it was months ago. Who knows what the deal is? And I tell fans this too, that this whole thing is a fluid situation, and you don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. I mean, who knows? They could have had a list with Johnny Manziel on it, and he's not on it. I'm really stunned that Manziel is not part of this. But, Trent Richardson was not in it. And people were like, oh, Trent Richardson should be the number one pick. Let me tell you something about Trent Richardson. I don't think he was that good in the AAF. Honestly, don't. Zach checking in, one of our superstar writers. I'm thinking DC's got the best roster. You look at their QBs. You see Jones and Jackson, two guys who I think could start. McCaffrey, Kari Lee, McBride, and Davis will all be threats in the passing game. And you also have to look at the defensive. They landed Scooby Wright. That was another guy that I liked. I agree with him there. Scooby Wright with your DC defenders. I like their draft too. I agree with that. Mr. Zix says, Houston looking good. Houston looks all right. I was surprised Houston went with back-to-back quarterbacks. I mean, and I've said this before, is this our first quarterback controversy with Walker and Connor Cook? We shall see. You're going to have to tune in for that. So, Big Slim 2018 told you Joe Callahan was going to be here. True. And then Shane says Sean Oakman will be very difficult to stop. If Sean Oakman was that great, why wasn't he picked earlier? I really thought that he would be one of the top guys out there. Now, Kristen Michaels was a guy that had name recognition and went high, but a lot of these other guys with name recognition went really low in the draft. So anyway, it was a fun 2 days. We're going to have a ton more coverage on XFL News Hub coming up with some great recaps. I appreciate you guys stopping by for the live broadcast of the draft recap. This was fun. We should do this more often, and we probably will. So that's it for me, folks. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, like us, subscribe on YouTube. We'll do more of these things, working on doing a whole studio so you can see my ugly mug. And maybe even doing our podcast live like this. I've been thinking about that too. So, but it's a lot of fun, guys. We'll catch you on the next time we do some kind of live recap. Appreciate you all in the chat room. And stick with XFL News Hub as we bring you more of the best. We are the number one pro XFL pro football site on the web. That's it for me, folks. And I will see you all Later. Don't forget to subscribe. Peace.